He thought I was just a poor old father who had nothing to offer his daughter. He saw my simple clothes. He saw my small house. He saw the old car I drove and assumed he understood exactly who I was. What he did not know was that every morning when he walked into the company where he worked as CEO, he was walking into a company that I owned. I had deliberately kept my name away from the spotlight because I wanted to know what kind of man my daughter had married. Then one evening he invited me to dinner with his parents. I accepted because I wanted to see how they would treat a man they believed was poor. I expected insults. I expected embarrassment. I never expected them to slide an envelope across the table. And when I opened it, I realized that the person sitting across from me knew something my son-in-law did not. My name is Daniel Carter, and for most of my life I learned one important lesson. Never judge a person's value by the things they wear. I own a successful company that had grown from a tiny office into a large business with employees in several cities. But after my wife passed away, I stopped caring about showing people what I had. I moved into a modest home. I drove an old car. I wore simple shirts and ordinary shoes. I wanted a quiet life. My daughter Emily was the most important person in my world. When she told me she was getting married to Michael, I tried to be happy for her. Michael was confident, intelligent, and successful. He had recently become the CEO of a company that was growing quickly. There was only one detail he did not know. That company was mine. I had placed professional managers between myself and the daily operations. My name rarely appeared in public company meetings. I wanted the business to run without my constant presence, and I wanted Michael to succeed because of his ability rather than because he knew who owned the company. At first Michael treated me politely, but over time his attitude changed. Whenever he visited my house, he would look around and make comments about the furniture. He once asked Emily why I still drove such an old car. Another time he laughed when I told him I preferred repairing old things instead of buying new ones. He never directly called me poor, but he made sure I understood that he thought I had very little. I never corrected him. I wanted to know whether he respected me as Emily's father or only respected people who had money. Then came the dinner invitation. Michael called me one Friday afternoon. He said his parents were visiting and wanted to meet me properly. He invited me to an expensive restaurant. I agreed. When I arrived, Michael was already sitting at the table with his parents. His father looked at my clothes and smiled politely. His mother looked at my old watch and then looked away. Michael introduced me as Emily's father. His father asked what I did for a living. I simply said I managed a few investments. That answer seemed to disappoint him. He asked whether I still worked. I smiled and told him that I worked when I needed to. The conversation became uncomfortable. Michael began talking about his career. He told his parents about the company he led and how difficult it had been to bring the business under control. His father proudly said that Michael was destined for an even bigger position. I listened quietly. Then his mother said something that stayed with me. She said Emily deserved a more secure family background. I looked at Michael. He did not defend me. Instead, he smiled nervously and changed the subject. That was the moment I understood everything. He was embarrassed by me, not because I had done something wrong, because I did not look rich. Dinner continued. Then Michael's father reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a large envelope. He placed it on the table in front of me. He said there was something I needed to understand before I continued being involved in their family. I opened the envelope. Inside was a financial document. I read the first page. Then I looked at the second. My hands became completely still. The document contained information about my company. It included internal numbers that very few people knew. But there was something even more disturbing. Someone had been trying to move ownership of several company assets into another structure, and Michael's name appeared in the paperwork. I looked across the table. Michael suddenly looked nervous. His father leaned forward and said that successful families needed successful people around them. He told me that if I wanted to remain close to Emily, I should stop interfering with Michael's future. I almost laughed. They still had no idea. I closed the envelope. Then I calmly asked Michael one question. Did you know about this document? He said no. His father immediately interrupted and said Michael knew enough. That was when I decided the game was over. I took out my phone. I called the company legal department. I told them to freeze every pending ownership transfer connected to the documents in the envelope. Michael stared at me. He asked who I was calling. I said I was calling my company. He laughed. He said I did not even understand how his company worked. I looked directly at him. Then I said something that changed the entire dinner. I told him that I understood the company very well, because I owned it. The table went silent. His mother looked confused. His father stopped smiling. Michael stared at me as if I had suddenly become a stranger. I explained that I had intentionally stayed away from the executive spotlight. I wanted my company to be managed by people who earned their positions. I had watched Michael work for years. I had seen his strengths. I had also seen his weaknesses. But I never expected him to become more concerned about impressing his parents than protecting the company he was trusted to lead. Michael looked at the documents again. Then he asked why I had never told him. I told him the truth, because I wanted to know how he would treat me when he thought I had nothing. His face changed. He finally understood every dinner, every conversation, every time he looked at my old car, every time he made a comment about my simple home. He realized that the man he had considered poor had been quietly watching him from the position of owner. But the biggest surprise was still coming. I told Michael that I was not going to destroy his career. I was not going to embarrass him in front of everyone. Instead, I gave him one chance. He could admit what happened. He could explain why those documents existed. He could take responsibility. Or I would let the company investigators discover everything themselves. Michael lowered his head. For the first time since I had met him, there was no confidence in his voice. He admitted that his father had pressured him to move certain assets. He said he had convinced himself that nobody would notice. But someone had noticed. I had. The dinner ended without another word. A few weeks later, the investigation was completed. Michael resigned as CEO. The company survived. Emily was devastated. She asked me why I had hidden my wealth from her husband. I told her that money was never supposed to be the test. Character was. I also told her something she never forgot. A person who respects you when they think you have nothing is worth more than a person who respects you only after discovering what you own. Emily eventually understood. Michael apologized to me, not because I owned the company, but because he finally understood how badly he had judged me. I accepted his apology, but forgiveness did not mean giving him back the position he had lost. Some lessons are too expensive to learn twice, and that dinner taught everyone at the table the same lesson. You never truly know the value of the person sitting quietly across from you. Sometimes the person you ignore is the person who has been watching everything. Sometimes the person you call poor is the person who built the wealth you admire. And sometimes the biggest mistake a person can make is believing that simple living means a person has nothing. That night I went home in the same old car Michael had once laughed at. My house was still the same. My clothes were still simple. Nothing about my life had changed. But one thing had changed forever. Michael finally understood that wealth is not always displayed in expensive clothes or luxury cars. Sometimes real wealth is the freedom to live simply because you have nothing left to prove. And I learned something too. The way someone treats you when they believe you have nothing can reveal more about their character than anything they say when they discover you have everything. If you were sitting at that dinner table, would you have revealed the truth or stayed silent? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment because your support helps us bring more powerful stories to you.